Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 17 of Off the Sprue. In this video we'll be taking a look at scratch building palm trees in 1/35 scale. Trees and vegetation is an important part of any diorama build, and in this one I needed all sorts of plants, from grasses to shrubs and bushes, and also these two palm trees. Now, palm trees are as synonymous with the Vietnam War as the Huey helicopter or the M16 rifle. And this build of mine, the rice paddy, it just wouldn't look right without one or two palm trees. There are palm tree kits available from various manufacturers with resin trunks and photo-etched leaves, but they tend to be very expensive. But fear not, in this video I'll show you a quick and easy way to make your own. First, you'll need some twigs. I've got two different sizes here. You'll need some 2mm Vallejo masking tape, and then finally these dried bracken fern leaves. Finding these leaves for my builds requires a little bit of physical exertion. They are commonly found in mountainous areas here in South Africa, notably the Drakensberg Mountains. And when the missus and I go on holiday trips, I always make a point to collect some of these while we're out in the mountains. In wintertime they dry up, they curl, and then it's easy to collect them on the trail. In this picture you'll see they're quite abundant, commonly found in mountainous areas here in my country. They are perfect for 1/35 diorama builds. Some of them are straight, some of them curl up. All that needs to be done is to cut them from the stem, and once I've got a good collection of different sizes and shapes, I can prepare them for painting. In this case I'm going to use alligator clips, and I'll be spraying each leaf individually. I find that there's no real primer required for these. I'll be using Tamiya's flat green. This is the base coat, and I make sure to evenly spray each and every single leaf in this color. Once the Tamiya paint is dried, I'm going to add some accents. In this case I'm using Vallejo lime green, and I now just spray the center section just to give it a nice color accent along the center of the leaf. There you can see, it just makes it more visually interesting. And that's it. That's all that's required for the leaves. If you do have bracken fern in your country, well, then you know what to do. If not, there are many different ways of creating palm leaves. I've heard of silk leaves being used, and of course you've got access to all the other pre-manufactured ones, photo etched, etc. So let's move on to creating the branches. For this I'm using two twigs, bent at a slight angle similar to a palm tree, and the first thing I'm going to do is to cut it down to size. Just don't knock over the camera like I just did. Once you've done that, we need to pin this similar to what we did to the models and the figures. This involves drilling a small hole and inserting a piece of wire. This will help us later on to fit this to the diorama foam base. Once this is done, we need to remove some of the loose bark still on this twig, and for this I use a fine sander, sponge sander. Just make sure you remove all the loose material from this twig. And once this is done, we can now move on to create the unique ring texture that one would see in typical palm tree trunks. A very easy way of doing this is to use masking tape. In this case I'm using 2mm Vallejo tape, and all you need to do is to start covering the twig with the tape, making sure the rings, the bands overlap about by 1 millimeter. Once you've done this, you are ready to move on to the next stage. To get the characteristic rough shape of a palm tree trunk, those rings aren't nice and tidy, I'm going to use a hobby knife, preferably one with a blunt blade, and I just start scraping this across the masking tape that I just applied. And if you keep this up for long enough, you'll see that the overlapping rings start to curl up. The point being not to remove the masking tape, but just to roughen it up. Once we have that texture, we can move on to primer. Again, I like using Vallejo's black acrylic primer. This is evenly sprayed across the entire trunk. And the reason I'm using black is also for color later on. The mistake I've made in the past is to start with brown tones. In fact, these are gray if you look at the real life ones. So I'm using medium gray as the base color. And I try to spray this from the top down so that I keep the black sections of the primer visible inside the rings. Next, I need to tone down the gray a bit, and for this I'm using stone gray, just to add a slight beige stone color to the trunk. This is lightly sprayed across the entire tree trunk. The next step is to apply some filter. I'm using this brown filter from MIG Productions, and this is now brushed onto the trunk in a similar way that one would do it on models. Just a light coat, and this will now run into all the recessed detail on the trunk. And you can see we're already close to the look of a real palm tree trunk. Only step that remains is to dry brush some light color. I'm using Deck Tan onto the tree trunk. Of course, with dry brushing, you remove as much of the paint as possible from the brush bristles. You now lightly brush across the tree trunk. This will highlight the raised detail on the trunk itself. And that's it. There you can see the characteristic ringed look, the rough look of a tree trunk, palm tree trunk. The last thing to do is to connect our leaves to the trunk itself. And to do this, I use my Dremel tool and a fine cutting bit, and first cut some hollows, anchoring spaces into the top of the trunk. To attach the leaves, I expose a little bit of the stem, cutting one or two of those tiny little leaves off, and I now use gel type super glue, CA glue, and attach the individual leaves into the tree trunk, keeping in mind the way that a real palm tree would look, the way the leaves are arranged. First start maybe with one or two sections in the middle, and then start adding ones on top until you have the round ball shape of a typical palm tree. Very important to keep your references close by when you do this. And there you go, that's a quick and easy way of creating your own palm trees. This was all built from scratch, things that you can find in the garden, out in nature. They don't even cost that much. And these two palm trees certainly round off our diorama display. Guys, that's it for video 17. These are all the products that I've used, available from your local hobby store. If you're curious to see the rest of the build, the way it turns out, you can follow me on Instagram. I post regular updates there. Hoping to see you soon in episode 18.